Digitel is one of the leading companies for live streaming events, running corporate virtual events, or managed webinars. If you're looking to reach worldwide markets or generate revenue from adding a virtual component to your meetings and conferences, leverage Digitel's 33 years of experience in creating flawless online events. For more information, go to digitellinc.com or email them at contactus@digitel.com.
Are you a follower?
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna call the Adler.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth, here we are, another GatherGeeks.
Yes. And if people in the meeting and event industry think they don't have to reckon with the Me Too movement, well, they're wrong. And today on GatherGeeks, we are bringing together two executives in the trade show industry. Courtney Muller, who is Chief Corporate Development and Strategy Officer at Clarion UX, and Angela Scalpello, the former Senior Vice President of Organizational Development for UBM and who is now a consultant. They have led a movement at SISO to introduce education specifically targeted to women in the industry on how to advance their careers and other issues of importance to them. And the result was the SISO Executive Women's Forum. They've also commissioned data showing that the lack of women in leadership positions, it's really stark, as we'll hear. And they've shown that the numbers do not represent women's overall numbers in the industry. So they're going to discuss that research as well as what women and men can do to fix pay inequities, help women advance in the C-suite, and more. David, you spoke with them at the recent SISO C.E.O. Summit in Las Vegas.
Yeah, no, it was, I was actually, not only did I speak with them, I attended their event. And I was one of two men at the event. And I would say that, I think I said this also in the middle of the interview, that it was so much more valuable for men than it was for women, actually, so that we understand what's going on. And it was eye-opening. It was fantastic.
I think there's a sense of relief, really, that these conversations are finally happening out in the open. These are conversations that maybe happened, over GChat or coffee. But now these are happening out in the open. We've seen as the entertainment industry, media, advertising, architecture, and other fields have dealt with these high profile scandals that are revealing the need for widespread culture changes. But meeting and event professionals, they're not immune, and it's not okay to think that you can sit this one out.
Well, especially because the diversity of the people that plan events and the people that run big companies have to be in sync. I mean, it really is part of the future in many cases, in all cases. And that we just have to get real.
So let's take a listen.
Courtney, tell us what happened here. We're at the SISO C.E.O. conference, which is the largest show for the C-level people in the trade show business and the show business, which is a huge business that people don't realize. Tell us
it's a hidden industry.
It's a hidden industry, right? Tell us what you did and how you got to this incredible forum that you're doing. And also what I want to get to in this whole talk is the whole issue. Why is this such an important issue? And Angela will go into some of those details as well.
I love talking about this. It's almost been 2 years ago now. It was post CEO Summit 2016, and there was a noticeable lack of women on the panels. Not one, in fact.
But that's not just an issue with us.
Correct.
Okay.
No, it's an issue. That is absolutely correct,
okay.
David.
I'm going to jump in here too, and I'm going to
whenever you want.
That's the beauty of podcasting. It's unfiltered.
Exactly. Well, that's great. I love it. So there was a noticeable lack of women on the panels. There were none, as a matter of fact, and there were also
that's a lack.
There were very few from the operator side in the audience as well. I mean, there were certainly women there, but a lot of them were sponsors and affiliated with those companies. So at the board level, we talked about this and it came up. What's going on here?
Well, go back a little bit into the fact that there are so many women in the industry and that it's
I'm going to get there, David.
Okay, good.
I'm going to get there.
I'm trying to I'm
going to get there.
The context so people jump on and get angry right away.
Yeah. Okay, well, how about this then? Yes, our industry is made up of approximately 2/3 women and only 10 to 12% are at the C level. That's the period bottom line, what we found out. And I'll tell you now how we got there. At the board level, we talked about the fact that we need more women on the panels, we need more women coming to the event. So Mary Larkin, Dana Teague, and I, who are female board members, only 3 of a few female board members, by the way, got together to talk about this. And we realized pretty quickly this is not an issue of just getting more women on the panels. It's not an issue of just doing a better job marketing the event and getting women to the event. This is an issue of the fact that there aren't that many women at the C-level who are qualified to come to the event, period. So we got together with the Negotiation Institute to conduct a study. We thought we knew that that was the case. We weren't sure, though. So we conducted a study with all the SISO members, and most of them did participate, to just figure out how many women were in the industry and at what levels.
Can you, before we go into that, explain how important SISO is in terms of how big it is?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I think people have to understand that, too. In order.
SISO represents all of the major trade show producers in the world. It's for profit only, so certainly there are a lot of big shows run by associations that are not represented by SISO, but SISO is all of the for-profit organizers, and we make up most of the industry. So by being at the SISO CEO Summit, you've kind of arrived in the industry. So for so few women to be arriving, it's just a really sad state of affairs. So we conducted this research, and we were not the least bit surprised by the results.
What were the major findings?
The major findings were that approximately 2/3 of our industry are women. And the higher up you go in the ranks, the fewer women there are. It is very stepped. It's incredible, actually. It's like at the C level, 12%. At the VP level, it's like 30%. You get to manager level, it's 50% women. I mean, it's just amazing. It's almost like women get weeded out the higher they go in the organization. Despite the fact that there's so many of them in the industry.
So to ask sort of an obvious question, why do you think, it's kind of an obvious answer, but how do you explain it?
If I could explain it, then I'd be the smartest person in the world.
But is it the boys' club? Is it as simple as the boys' club, or is it more complex?
There's so many more layers to it than that. There's just so many more layers to it than that. And what we've found through our study and our subsequent, now we've been conducting education for women in our industry and men, by the way. We welcome all men to our events. We'd love to have them in the room, in fact. We need them. We need their point of view. We need them to support us. But I think there's just so many layers to it. I mean, women are just, our DNA is different than men's. We behave differently. We value things differently. We feel we have to have more skills in order to do something. We're very different human beings, and therefore, in the workplace, we need to behave differently. Women need to behave differently in some cases in order to get ahead. And look, traditionally, men dominated the workplace. There was years of barefoot in the kitchen for women, obviously. That's changed, and slowly I think things are evolving and women are becoming more successful and rising through the ranks more in many industries. And we know there's been a rallying cry for women over the past 18 months.
So before we go over to Angela, can you explain your path and why you are here at the CEO Summit?
Sure. So I've been in the industry for about 25 years. I worked at Reed Exhibitions for 20 of those 25 years. I rose to the level of senior vice president at Reed. I was running 10 events covering 5 industry sectors.
Can you go through some of those so people get a context of how important what we do is?
Yeah. So I was running events in 5 industries: pharmaceutical manufacturing, food service, eye care, book publishing, and casino gaming. And with the exception of the food service events, all of the events that were in my portfolio were industry-leading events. So we were, in most cases, working with leading industry associations as partners. Most of the events I've worked on in my career, in fact, have been association partner events, which I find great value in. I was running a big portfolio. I left Reed about 4.5 years ago to go work for Urban Expositions. I started with them as a consultant, and then I was the executive vice president there for a couple of years. I actually introduced Urban to Clarion. Clarion bought us. We've now become Clarion UX, and I've been in the role of Chief Corporate Development and Strategy Officer now for about 4 or 5 months. It's been a great ride. We're having a wonderful time. And sadly, I'll tell you that I only got to the CEO Summit for the first time 3 years ago, despite the fact that I had been pretty high up in the industry for a little while. When you work at a large company like Reed, only so many people can attend. So it wasn't until I got to a smaller organization that I was actually given the ability to attend on behalf of my organization. I was invited to join the board by Tony Kalenka. Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate that. And being on the board of SISO has been an amazing experience for me. It's opened up so many opportunities and a lot of doors, and I've met great people.
What I think is what's so interesting is that the men in these organizations are so receptive to this, but there's no leadership that says just do it, right?
Yeah,
is that
that's correct. That's correct. And we've been really pleasantly surprised with how supportive and accepting the men have been with this whole theory of the fact that we do want to produce education for women, specifically for women. And, there was a lot of talk about that. Well, should it be just for women? And we decided at the end of the day, and we had to get mildly aggressive with the board to say, no, you need to understand. You're not a woman, so you don't understand. Right. That we need this. So SISO's been supportive. We're now going to be doing a day and a half in front of the leadership conference in Orlando in August. And the reason we want to do this is because the half-day sessions we've been doing, we feel like we've been wanting more at the end. And a lot of the more we've wanted is more of Angela Scalpello, quite frankly. Angela has now spoken at our 3 events, and we keep bringing her back because the women love her and keep asking for her back, and we keep wanting more. So
I want to go to Angela in a second, but I want to ask one last piece that I don't think people understand. All these industry sectors that you're involved in, we are seeing these events as like the new town squares for commerce and everything else. So the importance of what we're doing and having, a balanced group of people that are leading them is more important than ever now. Do you see that in terms of how ideas flow and communications and things like that? I mean, what we do is so important that we don't sometimes articulate that we are putting together these incredible ecosystems.
We are. No, my husband was in the industry for a little while, and we used to joke that we're putting on the biggest party for the industry, and I don't use that word lightly. It's not a party. But when people come together as an industry, it is very celebratory. People like to get together. They like to teach each other. They like to learn from each other, and obviously these are marketplaces we're creating for our industries, and that's really important.
Do you know what the word symposium is in Greek?
What?
Means drinking game.
There you go.
So ultimately, we're going down to Plato's symposium. It's all about how people gather. So let's move on to Angela and talk about the why, and talk about why are you so interested in the event industry? Because you grew up in this industry, and now your path is a little bit different, and you're consulting on all these issues.
So I did spend 13 years approximately with UBM, whether it was at UBM Tech, PR Newswire, which was a UBM company, or my last iteration was head office, UBM, Senior Vice President of Organizational Development. And exactly to what Courtney said, I saw it at UBM, and it's no secret that we were 60% women, 40% men. I'm sorry. Yeah, 60% women, 40% men. Still shocks me until you got to the senior ranks, and then it almost entirely flipped. And for me, the issue was that you need cognitive diversity in any part of your life, and you need different ways of thinking and approaching things, and you need greater diversity, especially at your leadership ranks, and you need women in senior ranks so that women in the industry can say, aha, this is an industry where I can become successful. I see women who are in powerful, successful, impactful roles.
So modeling becomes very important?
Critical.
Critical to these things?
Role models are so important, and if you don't have them, you don't even know what to aspire to. So having those female role models is really critical.
And to that point, there was an article published the other week that I saw which talked about a study where they asked people to draw pictures of a leader, and the pictures they drew were men. And it's because people see that most leaders are men. Now, interestingly enough, I reposted it on LinkedIn, and a woman I worked with years ago said to me, that's so interesting, Angela. I have a small son, and I did this with him, but I said, draw me a picture of a doctor, and he drew a woman, because his doctors are all women, his pediatrician, his dentist, etc. So again, you start to think the world is made up of doctors and, oh, they are women. We want to get to that point where we say the world is made up of really powerful leaders and, oh, they're women.
And do you, like I was warned a little bit before by Nicole Peck, who's my executive vice president, that I actually do some of the things that you talk about in your seminars, about sometimes I interrupt, sometimes I do things, and we don't know that as men sometimes. Do you have, as much of it is explaining to us what we do?
So I've been on executive teams for many years, and I had a colleague who would say to me, I really hate to interrupt you, Angela. And I'd say to him, well, then don't. Right? We call that man-interrupting.
Man-interrupting.
Man-interrupting. You just literally run right over people. The other thing, too, is that some men do what we call mansplaining, where you say something and somebody on the team says, what Angela's saying is, and I think, okay, I think I said it in English. I don't think I need to be translated by anyone. But, to Courtney's point earlier in terms of women behaving differently in the workplace, last year's session that I did was about the fact that, and again, these are generalizations, but there's truth in them, that women don't self-promote. That women, and I've talked to a lot of women this year who I've talked to about that. Women work hard and they really believe that someone is going to tap them on their shoulder and say, you know what, Courtney, we have a powerful role for you. We have a greater span of authority and responsibility. It doesn't work that way, right? A woman has to be able to say, this is what I do. This is what I want. This is what I can contribute. And be able to be considered. And, Courtney's comment about wanting men in these sessions is because we need men to mentor women and to sponsor women, right? Sponsorship is huge. And it was Monday's session was about leadership skills for 2020. That has no gender attached to it.
Well, I went to that session and I found it the most valuable thing I've heard at the entire conference.
Well, thank you.
And it made me think about things that I do that I'm not thinking about. I'm not conscious about it. And I think that it's really important that men are part of this in a big way. But what are some of the other differences that we need to know about that are so obvious when you think about it?
So if I was to step in front of the SISO full audience and say, this is what you need to pay attention to, I would say you need to, first of all, in terms of promoting women in your organization, you need to identify women who are coming up in the pipeline, and you need to create a strategy of what I would call women to watch. Because the study years ago at Hewlett-Packard about why there weren't more women applying for internal positions was that men applied for jobs when they had 6 out of 10 of the qualifications. And so they interviewed women who they knew were qualified for some of the jobs and asked them why they didn't apply. Women were waiting until they had 10 of the 10 qualifications. Now, let's play that out in the workplace. If that was to happen in your organization, David, and you knew that Susan was probably even a little more qualified than Robert, a leader has to tap Susan on the shoulder and say, I need to understand why you're not applying for that role. I see that you have the qualifications. And so that happens sometimes because, and I've interviewed thousands of people, I'll hear a man come into an interview and I'll say, have you ever done this? No, but I can learn. I can't tell you how many times a woman says, I could probably take a course in that.
Okay, so you've done the training to these people. Have you seen the behaviors change? Is when they learn how to do it, or they see that there's an issue that they can solve, does it change? Is it getting better? Courtney, is it getting better?
I mean, obviously we're not inside all these organizations to see what's happening.
You have your own, though. You sort of could see
Well,
it.
I know that when I leave these conferences, I always learn something. And then I'm positive that I have changed my own behavior as a result of what I've learned. So I'm positive that all the women in the room have done the same thing, that they've gone back and they've taken more control, frankly, of their own career, because now they feel they have the more tools and more understanding of the behaviors that they need to change in order to get ahead and compete with men in particular, but also just to compete. You do need to self-promote. You need to be your biggest fan. And women, they just they don't do that, generally speaking. They feel like they're bragging. They feel like, oh, someone will recognize me as long as I work hard. And that is such a common theme that you hear over and over again from women. I'm working so hard. I'm sure someone's going to notice.
How about we saw the survey also on salary differentials. Is that, how do you solve for that? I mean, is it just the leaders have to say, let's do it?
Period.
It's really not about,
Period.
It's not
That's
going to
it.
evolve.
It's not going to evolve. You have to do it. And we're aware of a few companies that after the initial SISO Women's Session last year, went back to their offices, looked at their salaries, and made adjustments of women in the same positions as men who were not making the same amount of money. So there have been some very positive changes as a result of what we've done. People have taken notice.
Talk about how things have changed from a profitability point of view because we're doing this. Is there an economic advantage to having this diverse workplace?
So I don't have quantitative data. However, there are studies that show that more diverse organizations, and diversity in this case we're talking about gender, have a better outcome in terms of profitability. I would also say that when women see that they're being developed, when they're being promoted, you have a more engaged workforce. And there, the research is exhaustive in terms of what engaged workforces can deliver. Now, the other thing I want to mention that we spent time on, and last year, and I think there were women who really made a change. Women last year left, and this year they did also, with a form that they fill out where they make a commitment to themselves of behavior they're going to change or things they're going to do differently. And they take a picture of it, they put it in an envelope, and they self-address it, and they give it to me. And I mail it to them 6 months later. And last year, one of the things that they committed to was, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish, and how will I create an agenda around it, and then how will I use politics to move that agenda. And politics in its purest sense, which is about getting something done and knowing who can be your ally and understanding where your agendas overlap for good or where you'll be competing for resources. And being able to learn how to spend, but first build social and political capital so that you can get things done in an organization and not get blindsided because you think that the strength of a good idea will get the idea forward in an organization. It doesn't work that way. We see it in what's happening in Washington. We see what happens in organizations, right? You've got to understand the organizational politics and dynamics. And that was the session you attended, which was you have to be able to read other people's emotions, understand where you are, right? Be able to adapt. Those are all the skills that you need in addition to the things like creating strategy, organizing resources, et cetera.
You also talked about emotional intelligence as one of the key things now. That's sort of rising to the top, right? Going to the top. How do you train the men to understand that emotional intelligence is as important? If they don't come to the session, for example, I saw it as clear as day from that.
So I make it a point of pointing out to men. I coach a number of senior executives who happen to be men. And in a very non-threatening way, just so that they'll be open to hearing it, I'll say to them, okay, so tell me what happened and tell me what the outcome was. And sometimes I know what the outcome is because their direct reports have reached out to me and they'll say, you know, this happened or that happened. And I'll say, well, it surprised you to know that when you did that, so-and-so felt intimidated. She stopped contributing ideas. And that's when they start to see the disconnect between intent and outcome, right? So I blew up at somebody and I yelled. Okay, well, do you realize what the consequences were? So pointing out, in essence, sometimes what you have to do is point out what the outcome is and what that behavior does. And so, you know, people who show up as a different leader, different every other day, right? Some days that they're supportive, some days they're anxious, right? If you're constantly out of balance, how can you focus on the task at hand?
Be consistent and all of it. It's very critical that we don't even know sometimes that we're not being consistent.
Right.
So someone has to tell you that.
Right, which is why I believe in 360-degree feedback.
I want to end on two different notes. First is the Me Too movement and what's happening now. Has that impacted, has that changed anything, or has it just sort of made it more in our face that we've got to do something?
I think that's a hard question.
Totally.
I think things.
That's why I'm asking.
I know. I think things. Yeah, I think things are going to change. I think women are not going to let these types of behaviors happen as much anymore. And I think men have had a wake-up call, a big wake-up call. And I know we've all said this. There are men out there shaking in their boots who are terrified that women are going to come forward about their past behaviors. So I think we are going to see a cultural shift. I really believe that. It's going to take a long time, though, like anything. But I feel the generation of women coming up now, seeing this Me Too movement, I think it's going to empower them to understand, no, I don't have to stand for that kind of behavior, and I'm not going to.
Right. So do you want to comment on that, Mate? This is a highly big deal, this thing.
Yeah, I don't know about Courtney, but I've had instances. I remember early in my career, I was at a conference, and I literally in the middle of the night checked out and went home because a man was stalking me. And now I look back at it and I think, look, what was he thinking, and why did he think that was appropriate? I was so much younger than him. I was by myself. You know, I've had instances where clients have said things that are really totally inappropriate. And I think that, first of all, we've got to instruct people and train people, and women have to feel their own power to literally say to somebody, I'm not comfortable with that, and that is totally inappropriate. Stop it.
Right. Okay, so the last question is, let's paint the scenario that you are a young woman in a small entrepreneurial company. You don't have the benefit of a big company behind you.
Yeah.
And you're seeing all this stuff happening, whether it's on Me Too type stuff or whether it's just inequity in the marketplace and that you're treating poorly. What does the woman who sees it happening do in a small organization? What is your advice to them?
My advice to them is there's no reason at this point not to come forward and speak up and say you think it's wrong. And if you don't get the answer you want, then leave. Period.
It's really, you can make the decision.
You can make the decision. You don't have to stick around for that.
Okay.
And if that starts happening enough, you know, these types of employers aren't going to have people working for them.
Right, right. Andrew, do you have a comment?
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's simple.
I think I've worked in small companies, and what I would advise someone in that situation to do, especially if there's no HR department or no articulated way that you escalate a concern like that, is to go to the most senior person, to let that person know. And if that person tries to shove it under the carpet or say something like, well, you know, maybe you, i.e. put the blame back on the victim, then I would leave. And it's important to leave, because what that response has told that individual is, this is not an organization that shares my values. This is not an organization that will support my development. And that's not an organization that deserves my talent. And I really think, you know, to Courtney's point, especially in a world of social media, there is no place to run and no place to hide.
That is a good place to end, but I want to find out, how do we reach you guys? How do people come to the conference that's happening in the summer? And just in general, what resources are the way to reach out for this young woman, let's say, that needs a little support too?
It's C. Muller, CMULLER at urban-expo.com.
And how do you get, if you want to go to this conference, I know that it's not totally open to the public.
SISO.org.
So you can find out more about it and join SISO.
SISO.org, exactly. You need to be a member of SISO to attend.
Right.
But the women's conference is only $99 for SISO members. By joining SISO, by just joining, the benefit is already there of being able to attend this conference for $99. So worth it.
And the people that are attending are in charge of these ecosystems that are millions and millions of people.
Right.
So the power of what we do at our conference at SISO has an effect throughout the whole society.
It does. And I'll tell you, I've recently seen a trade show be called out because there were scantily clad women in the booths. Right?
Right.
And that's the exhibitor. That's not really the producer, but
Right.
the producer got called out and was told by the industry, don't let this happen anymore.
Okay.
So
how do we get in touch with you?
So the best way is email.
Okay.
Angela, Angela, and then a period, Scalpello.
Oh, God.
I know. Phonetical, though.
Okay.
S like in Sam, CALP like in Peter, ELLO @gmail.com. BizBash.com. And you're right, this is a huge industry. We bring buyers and sellers together in what you call the town square, and people enact business and create lifelong relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I love about this business. Well, thank you guys. And
Thank you, David.
we're going to do more and more on these topics. This is a great topic.
So, David, I found this quote from Courtney just chilling. She said, it's almost like women get weeded out the higher they go in the organization.
Yeah, no, that was a pretty chilling comment. And it's why there's not a lot of women in senior management in many cases, because there's also self-weeding out as well. I mean, because but I think we now are at a place where that doesn't have to happen.
No, not at all. And recognizing that there's a problem and then working on solutions is the way you're going to, get to real change. The other thing that I liked about this conversation was that Courtney and Angela suggested practical things that executives can do, put together a list of the women to watch for future job openings and review your salaries of men and women in the same roles and then make adjustments. And I'll add to that, attend education sessions like this one, like you did, David.
Yep.
And, look at your own past speakers at your events and how they break down by gender. And let's also add by race, survey your employees. I mean, there are practical things that you can do to end this. It's not a problem that we can't get our arms around.
Well, I think, and I'm so proud of the trade show industry for actually approaching this in such a sophisticated way. It was, I was on the board of SISO for many years. And when this was presented, it was universally accepted. They just had to be asked. I mean, that's one of the responsibilities, I think, of being in a leadership role, is to just ask to do things that are innovative and are forward thinking.
Mm-hmm. And you have to make that ask, but also, these are things that boards should be thinking about themselves too. They should be proactive.
Totally. Well, it was our female board members that took the responsibility to bring it to the board as well. So the more senior managers, the senior women in senior positions in leadership in these associations, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Let's hope, right?
Let's hope.
And let's check back.
Okay. So what's going on at BizBash, Beth?
Well, to our listeners in Florida, or those of you who need a reason to travel to Florida or want a reason, BizBash Live is coming up so soon. It's at the Fort Lauderdale Convention Center on May 16th. We will have an exhibit hall full of vendors to the industry and a packed lineup of speakers. You can learn about sponsorships from the team at the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. Hear about creating a year-round event strategy for nonprofits from Sharif Malnek, who is chairman of the glamorous Intercontinental Miami Make-A-Wish Ball. You can learn about social media and audio-visual production at our new in-depth master classes. Don't miss this. We are working so hard on this event and are so excited to be bringing it to Fort Lauderdale on May 16th. And I'll note registration is at bizbash.com/events.
Fantastic. Well, before we end, I want to add a new element to our podcast, and that is to thank the people that actually produced this for us. We want to do a special shout out to Claire Hoffman, who's one of our Los Angeles bureau chief, who also helps us with the podcast, and Dave Nelson, who is our producer and editor, and Rebecca Pappas, who helps us with the distribution of it. And it does take a lot of people to put these podcasts out. We love doing them, and we want to thank those people for helping. So until next time,
gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on. If you are looking for a state-of-the-art learning management system, take a look at Digitel's newest platform, OpusDX. OpusDX offers the robust platform for event organizers and associations to manage content. To learn more and schedule a demo, email them at contactus@digitelinc.com. That's contact us at digitellinc.com. This episode is also sponsored by Event Leadership Institute. Invest in yourself and your staff with self-paced online event education designed to fit into your busy schedule. Subscribe to the Event Leadership Institute for only $25 per month and gain access to an extensive on-demand video library of classes, as well as interviews with industry leaders. Best of all, you can watch classes in small pieces or all at once. For more information, visit eventleadershipinstitute.com.